we've talked all morning about, innovation and different case studies. And there's a lot of innovation that's happening in open source right now. Actually, it's always happening in open source. But what are some of the projects or innovation areas that most interest you or that you find most exciting right now?
It's always a big question. And I always have this sense that I could give a better answer. So I apologize in advance if it's not the answer you're looking for. But there's, the way I think about it is open source has fundamentally changed the world. I've been at it for a long time, and I feel really proud of that notion that, in a sense, we've won. And with great power comes great responsibility. And so we keep innovating. I think of open source as the real innovation engine for the broader industry. And what are the things that are facing us right now? Well, there's all of this enthusiasm, interest, excitement around what's happening at the edge. And we're doing work in the Kubernetes community and in OpenShift specifically to help enable some of that. So bringing those use cases to life, whether it's tiny footprint microshift or whether it's a single node OpenShift or even a few servers in a rack in a retail environment. Those are helping businesses figure out something that's new and different than they haven't been able to do before. Typically, that's connected to AI. So it's really difficult to have a conversation, especially right now, that doesn't include AI. Thank you to the visibility of ChatGPT. And I have often a conversation that's, I'm pretty sure the world's coming to an end. Talk me off the ledge. I'll do my best. But I think there's so much potential in that space. Some of it is definitely unnerving. We have to pay close attention, but there's so many cool things that we're already seeing happening today in AI, and we think of that as a critical workload running directly on OpenShift, whether it's the low-level hardware enablement or whether it's the higher-level application or use case or way that we're putting a machine learning model into a production environment. And then the other thing that I think is really important, especially right now, is how can we evolve technology in a way that's more and more sustainable from just an environmental footprint perspective. Sustainability from a community point of view, we talk about quite a bit, but how are we building technologies that help us lower our energy utilization and ultimately our carbon footprint? So there's a really cool project that we'll be talking about throughout the rest of the week at Summit called Kepler, and we're using that to show how you can understand not just the platform level part of the energy consumption, but the whole view, the whole stack, whether it's from a pod or a namespace or nodes in a cluster. So between edge and AI and sustainability, we just keep moving forward. There's a lot of cool things happening.
There's so many new cool things happening, because that led really well, and I feel like you were in our conversation, actually, because you touched on.
I was not.
So Tracy, it's totally setting you up. So talking about innovation and down in the platform level, in Kubernetes, what are some innovations that you're working on in the core to really, drive the OpenShift platform forward?
Yeah, so it's a good one. And I'm going to go back to the session that Mike and Derek had earlier today for everybody who was in here. That's driving so much of the work that my team and Joe's team are working on today. Chris highlighted the fact of the edge work. We partnered with the CTO's office in trying to bring forward this new concept of microshift, and how do we actually extend to a new type of deployment for serving our edge. We also have single node OpenShift that we've introduced last year, which is yet another one, another deployment topology around edge. And then I think the last one that has been really interesting and consuming a lot of bandwidth on the team because of so much positive conversation, both internally and externally with partners and just teams, abroad is our hosted control plane effort, or HyperShift, which is what they talked about earlier today. That idea right there was actually born out of several conversations that we had with IBM actually, when we were looking at how were they actually utilizing an IBM cloud to deploy. And we were trying to figure out, okay, well, what's the right mechanism for bringing them onto the OpenShift platform? A few conversations after the IBM acquisition happened, and from there, Derek, give a lot of credit to, kind of thought, well, hey, what should we be doing in this space? This looks really good. And we've been trying to build that that platform deployment ever since, and working with so many different areas to try and build it out, so now that we can have contributors inside of the rest of the ecosystem. So the CNV team is actually trying to enable HyperShift there. We've got significant integration work happening on the ROSA side. So there's just so much innovation in these spaces because, as they talked about, we are hearing so much feedback. We are hearing cost just is one that we hear all the time. That's just been something that we try to take into play. So all of these pieces of feedback that we're getting both from an ecosystem and our customer perspective are really leading to some really cool technologies that we're getting ready to put live.
So there's all this innovation happening in the platform. So Joe, how does that set you up for all the applications that are running on top?
It's all about the applications, right? The infrastructure is just there to serve the needs of the application developers. So one thing I always say is, if you're building a new cloud native application today, or developers are building that, it's pretty much going to go into a container deployment model. Nobody's sitting there eager to put that in a VM or on vSphere or whatever. So you're either probably running in containers using something like Kubernetes, or maybe even beyond that with a function as a service or that type of offering. But that still represents a very small percentage of the applications that we see in the real world from an enterprise perspective. So a couple things we've been focusing a lot on. One is application modernization, right? And you heard some of that here this morning, right? Looking at your existing estate, whether that's a JBoss estate or a WebSphere estate or WebLogic or more monolithic type apps, and figuring out how do you bring that forward? What do you need to bring forward? And does it make sense to do either a lift and shift to a container environment, or what are the candidates for refactoring and so forth? So if you've heard a lot about application modernization from Red Hat over the last year, that's intentional because we know that that's a big challenge for our customers. And then the other thing is, whether it's a new application or one that you're modernizing, and this goes to what Chris said, increasingly you're going to need to connect that application to data in new and interesting ways. And these days that means figuring out what your AI strategy is going to be. And so we're very focused on AI from a couple of different perspectives. One is as a workload that can run on Kubernetes, that can run in containers. So that has informed work we've done with NVIDIA and the Kubernetes community, as Derek talked about earlier, to make sure that we can leverage GPUs in the cluster and do the right things for those types of workloads. But it goes beyond that, right? There's the whole open data hub and how that's driven OpenShift data science and bringing capabilities to the data scientists to develop notebooks, to do MLOps types of workflows, essentially CI/CD for your model development. And then most recently, work we did with IBM, and there'll be a session on this at Summit, around how do you do large-scale training of large-scale foundation models in a Kubernetes environment. So they built something called the Vela supercomputer. It leverages OpenShift as a platform on the IBM cloud. It's a pretty amazing story, but it started building in new capabilities for things like batch scheduling. So you'll hear about things like Codeflare and the multi-cluster app dispatcher and stuff we've done around Kserve. And this is bringing capabilities that are traditionally associated with like HPC or batch style environments to be able to run these models or train these models in a cloud native environment. And so I'm super excited about the work we continue to do there. We're also doing a lot with our partners. And I think that's going to drive a whole new wave of innovation in the platform and in the infrastructure, as well as stuff that we can do for those end users.
So we've talked about innovation in the platform. we've also seen over the past couple of years, the rate of change of innovation in Kubernetes itself has slowed down as things are stabilizing. We went from 4 releases a year to 3 releases a year. But there's still this whole explosion of innovation on top of Kubernetes. So Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
As it should be. I mean, the Kubernetes, I don't remember which KubeCon, but it's easily been 5 years. There was a presentation, one of the keynote presentations was basically, let's make Kubernetes boring and make an analogy between the Linux kernel and a broader Linux distribution and Kubernetes and sort of container-based use cases. So we're stabilizing to a place where, yeah, making Kubernetes boring is an awesome goal to have, because what that means is it's ubiquitous, it's reliable, it's stable, people build around it, and that's what we're seeing today. So it's established itself as this fundamental, critical technology platform that others are building on top of. Like, I would call that total success. And we'll just keep seeing that proliferation above and then kind of around Kubernetes, just keeping, as we're modernizing applications and bringing data and applications together on a common platform, we're tapping into use cases that we haven't thought of before. So we got to keep building and innovating on top. I think it's awesome.
And we've heard so many use cases so far today, and we have so many more this afternoon. Tracy, so when we talk use cases, we think about, well, some of us at Red Hat think about our layered services, because we think about everything that's built on top. You're talking about innovation. So as we bring some of the new projects into the layered services, so how does that impact your team and the work that your team does coming from engineering?
Yeah, so it's good. And actually, I completely agree with Chris. I like the stability in the platform means I don't get woken up in the middle of the night anymore. No, which is a positive thing, because what we're seeing right now is that our customers have significant workloads that are running right now. And so it's business critical applications running. We need that stability there. And what we need to see is where some of the pieces where customers are dabbling, or partners even are dabbling in some new ideas and things that they're thinking about for the future. That's where we're also seeing some of the innovation that we're putting in. Or we're seeing, the one thing that really comes to my mind is some of the, we heard a lot about management today so far in some of these use cases, and I think about what what my team is working on right now. We're looking at how do we actually bring the management story together from a managed services perspective and also from an on-premise perspective. We heard a lot about ACM. Those who are deploying ROSA go out and use the OCM APIs. How do we bring those things together and innovate there so that we bring the best of experience to whatever your hybrid deployment is, extend it to also to the edge. The other thing I would say too is it's given us an opportunity on my team to actually work more in depth with some of the partner ecosystem. So my engineering team works heavily with the partner ecosystem team inside of engineering, and we have spent a lot of time recently working in the telco space, working in the GPU space that Joe mentioned, and we're just able to go out and have a broader impact now in the OpenShift ecosystem on things that we haven't had a chance to, because we don't have to focus nearly as much on making sure that the platform is stable. So, and then, the last one is my telephone has been ringing recently internally around the AI space. The data science team is really, now that they're engaging very heavily with the IBM team, working on what the next thing for Rhodes is going to be, we're seeing a lot of engagement there that is actually filtering down to more requirements, to the OpenShift, into OpenShift and into some of the necessary tweaks that we need to make to the platform to handle their use cases. So. All in all, I think it's positive, because we're getting such encouraging feedback from new use cases, as Chris mentioned, that we just hadn't been able to think about or even actually take a step back and come up with ourselves. So I think it's a reinvigorating innovation within inside the team.
So speaking of reinvigorating innovation, Joe, what are the things that you're excited about? I know we have a lot of announcements this week.
Yeah, so Chris mentioned this, Tracy as well. Like, we invest a lot in the CNCF ecosystem and driving innovation above Kubernetes. Some of the, and I think you're all aware of many of those projects and some of the product capabilities that they brought in. Some of the stuff that I'm interested in. So today you heard a lot about folks using Tecton and our OpenShift pipelines for CI/CD, using GitOps in our, based on the Argo CD project, together with that or on its own. And those are two of our most popular layered features, right? They're being deployed for application deployments, for cluster deployments. For cluster deployments, not even OpenShift clusters. We have customers using it for third-party cluster deployments as well. And so we're always thinking about how to bring that together. So you'll hear about this week some work we've been doing to bring that together with some of our security investments in a new secure supply chain offering called Trusted Application Pipelines. So come to the keynotes, you'll get to see that firsthand. But it's really about bringing automation together with things like artifact signing. SigStore is a key technology there, software bill of materials and so forth, to make that whole process of how you build applications more secure and how to shift security into that build phase, right? So that's one thing. So it builds on the investments around things like GitOps and CI/CD and SigStore, but then it brings a whole new solution around that. Earlier this morning, you heard Mike and Derek talk about what we're doing in the application networking space, right? And so building on things like Service Mesh, Istio, Envoy, bringing that together with Kubernetes Ingress through the Gateway API project, and then bringing in the API management world, which is essentially about how do you manage APIs coming north-south into those applications. All those are that's a common problem area, and moving towards common solutions for things like layer 7 networking, bringing together a common control plane. You'll hear about a new product this week based on the Scupper project, which is about application networking across clusters. And so that's something that's super exciting. And then you've heard today about work we're doing around management and security, ACM, ACS, and so forth. A lot of interesting stuff there, including for both self-managed and as a service. So you'll hear about ACS as a service, and then we're bringing the management capabilities to our SaaS offerings as well. So all this stuff, it's just going to continue, but it's not just about the projects, it's about putting together the solutions based on those technologies that are solving the problems that you guys care about. So.
Thanks, Joe. I know we only have a couple minutes left. This morning, we heard from Advanced Auto Parts as well as Audi, and really they're hitting on people, processes, and technology. And something that really stuck with me is Sebastian said that people first, because people solve problems, something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but so what are your thoughts on the people, process, and technology?
Well, I'm a technologist, and it pains me every time to admit that the technology is the easy part. Working with people, I love people. Working with people is challenging because we're not all seeing the same exact picture, and we're not all coming with the same appetite for change. And so how do you align our vision and our ability to not just change, but even absorb change at an organizational level? It's actually really, really hard. I was just talking this morning with somebody about how difficult it is to get a group of people to go together in the same direction at the same time. And my super trivial example was if you take a crowd this side and you say, like, on the count of 3, we'll all clap. Say 1, 2, 3. It's not easy. And that's a pretty simple task. So the process is coming from the people, and the people in the process help figure out what the technology is, even though I wish it were the other way around. Yeah.
Thank you. And Joe, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my team is sick of hearing this from me, but we often talk about Red Hat's open hybrid cloud strategy. It's a strategy that we've been articulating for more than a decade. Often that comes across as really about hybrid infrastructure, and certainly that's a big problem, right? You guys are running stuff in your data centers, you're running it across multiple public clouds, now out of the edge. How do you manage across that? How do you make it consistent? That's a big part of our hybrid cloud strategy, but it's just one part. The other part, as I talked about earlier, is your application portfolios. They're also hybrid, right? They're not just new, shiny cloud native applications. There's a lot of existing legacy, traditional applications that you need to manage and modernize. And then there's new things you need to do with data, analytics, AI. So that's hybrid. But the third pillar is about people and process, right? Because you have a hybrid workforce, right? You have folks that have been working in your IT departments for decades, right? That really know how stuff works, but have also been in some established processes for a long periods of time. You have new people that you're hiring out of college, or they're coming in with more sort of a newer mindset around agile and cloud native development and so forth. But all those folks need to come together to get the job done, whether it's building your applications, managing the infrastructure, or managing apps across that infrastructure. And so that's a big part of what we do at events like this, what we do with engagements with customers, is how do you bring those people and processes together in a hybrid mode that works for you and so forth. And that, to me, that's really the third and probably the most important pillar of our open hybrid cloud strategy is how do you do that effectively and to move your business forward. So.
Thank you. I believe we are out of time, and thank you so much for coming down and joining us, Chris, and Tracy and Joe.
Thank you.
Very much appreciate it.